but some items that should move fairly quickly and some that may not. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, based on our discussion during work session yesterday, item number 6 under consent actions, first reading, and ordinance establishing fees for the Community Development Department and repealing and replacing ordinance 030-2009 will be removed pending further work sessions. And then I would note that, and I'll check with Jeanette on this, oh, it's already on the agenda, that the item number 12 will be continued to December 17th.
Thank you. At this point, I will open up for public comment. Anybody wishing to make public comment at this time may do so. Seeing none, I will close public comment, bring it back to the board for any commissioner comments. George?
Yeah. Open Space and Trails 2015 calendar is out. 2015 is an important date for our Open Space and Trails program because it's going into its 25th year. Incredible. And it's a great calendar. You can pick it up here at Plaza One. And each of the pictures is kind of interesting. Each of the pictures on the calendar has also a little insert. And the insert talks about, gives a brief sort of historical picture and explanation in terms of what took place on that property years past. So I would encourage you to pick up your 2015 Open Space and Trails calendar here.
Any other comments? Move on to consent action items, and the first, we've got consent action, we've got some minutes to approve, the minutes of November 18th, the regular, that's the special meeting of November 18th, the regular meetings of November 19th, and the work session of October 28th, November 6th, and November 18th. Are there any adjustments to those?
Motion to approve?
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Next, we move on to our consent action, first reading set for public hearing on December 15th. And I will first state that December 15th is a Monday. Boy, that calendar hasn't been changed since November. Since elections. It's Monday, yeah. So, thank you, George. It's my go-to calendar. Which is an unusual day for us to have a regular meeting, and we will be having public hearing on that Monday, so I want the public to be well aware that they can come and make public comment on that day. It's a Monday. We will start at, are we starting at the 12 o'clock time? Our normal 12 o'clock time. The reason we're doing that on a Monday is because the state statute requires that we pass a budget first and second reading by December 15th. So it's the last day that we're able to get that in. So we're scheduling a special meeting. So just an actual note to the public that that's a day that they can come in and make public comment. The first items on our consent actions are budget items. And Connie's here to present.
Connie Garofalo, Budget Director. We're here today seeking approval on 3 resolutions concerning the 2015 budget for Pitkin County. These resolutions contain the final version of our 2015 budget. We began our meetings with you back on October 14th when we had an overview and focused on the general fund and some of the major themes of this year's budget. We then continued in more detail in subsequent meetings, focused on each core area of the county's strategic plan, presenting the different funds and departments related to that core focus area of the strategic plan. And now today we are here with our final budget. The documents in your packet today show the 5-year budget plans of the major funds of the county, as well as a fund balance overview, which shows fund balances, revenues, and expenditures for all Pitkin County funds. And we also have a list of the approved buy-up requests. The total 2015 budget for Pitkin County is $95.6 million. This is a 16% increase over 2014 and includes a number of investments in capital projects in the Translator Fund, the airport, library, and transit sales and use tax. It also has a 10% increase in revenues. In this, we are maintaining a healthy fund balance of 66% of expenditures for all county funds totaled altogether. For the general fund, our 2015 budget is $32 million. This is a 12% increase over 2014, but we also have healthy revenues, an 11% increase in revenues over 2014. For the general fund combined, we have a fund balance of 45% of expenditures, which is very healthy. And for the general fund operations, we have a 5-year surplus in our budget plan of $1,888,000. So overall, we're presenting a healthy and balanced budget to you. As we went through the budget process, we focused on a number of major themes, which we called our big rocks. And these 3 themes were the renewal and modernization of county facilities, improvements to information technology so that we could provide a more effective and efficient delivery of county services to citizens, and then also the third area, staff capacity and retention. And our general fund capital plan focused around the renewal and modernization of facilities, and then the buy-up request that staff presented focused on these major themes in our budget, and priorities were given to these major themes. The first 2 resolutions in your packet focus directly on the budget, first to adopt the budget and then to appropriate the expenditures. And then the third resolution is setting mill levies for county funds. The mill levies will generate a total of $24.2 million in property tax for all of the funds, and of this 29%, or $7.1 million, is for the general fund. The only large change in the mill levies is for the ambulance district. As you know, the voters approved an increase in the ambulance tax for the first time in its history, and allowed us to go up to 0.5 mills for the ambulance district. With your approval, we are setting the level of tax lower than that at 0.4 mills and generating about $200,000 less in property tax for the ambulance district than the maximum that the vote would have allowed. So these are the major highlights of what is set before you in the resolutions. And I'd like to know if you have any questions or concerns as we're going forward.
I'll make a quick comment on something that I mentioned on a bunch of time during the budget process, and it comes in, I guess, the form of somewhat of an apology of the interest income in looking at the Financial Advisory Board and the increase from 2015 to 2016 in budgets going forward, and in looking at our Financial Advisory Board's increase on what those numbers would be for investment incomes. It is an increase. It's not substantial the way that one would think it is, because it's going from 0.1% to 0.3%, which is like 3 times greater than it would be. But when I was scrutinizing the budget through the budget process, I would see, you know, $100,000 one year of interest income, the fund balance going down, and $300,000 worth of interest in the next year. And I was very much questioning that, and I had to really dive into the Financial Advisory Board numbers and those sorts of things to see where that was coming from. But I would put a cautionary word out to make sure that we see that we can turn over our investments, because it's very hard. We've gone through it several times when we do look at the fund balances and how they're invested. It's very hard to turn those over, because there are only, I believe there's only 1 or 2 banks in Aspen that's qualified for us to invest in by the state statutes that require certain things within the investments that we look at. That's why those rates are partially so low. But there is an anticipation that those rates will go up, or that they'll change, and I know that the Financial Advisory Board has scrutinized those. I'm just putting a word out to keep an eye on those going forward, because it does amount to a fairly substantial revenue stream over all of the different funds that have money invested. And when you look at and as Connie said in her presentation, we have a very healthy reserve fund. That money is invested very safely at a very low interest rate, unfortunately. But hopefully those interest rates will change in the way that we've predicted to have those 5-year revenues coming in, because they are substantial and they would change our budget substantially. So I guess in the form of apology, I apologize for pointing out and I guess criticizing to some extent on how that was done in there, thinking that it was a math error in the spreadsheets, which it wasn't. So you guys have done your job well. It was just a understanding on something that's fairly complicated. So
We did go back and make some corrections, adjusting better to the flow of the fund balances. So there were some changes too after your comments.
Great,
we
thank
took
you.
A closer look at it. And of course, we will keep the interest income and the other more volatile revenues under close watch during the year and be coming back to you all if we see anything that seems to be changing significantly beyond our projections.
thank you. George.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. This number always looks large certainly for the overall budget of 95 million, but the general fund of 32 million, which basically provides all the basic services to the county, public safety, roads and bridges, the assessors, recorders, the clerks, and things like that. And some people always are concerned that the county budget or government in general is impinging too much on their personal taxes and where their money goes. And it should be noted that the general fund, which we receive about half of those revenues from sales and property taxes, the citizens in Pickens County pay very little of their property taxes towards that general fund. It equates to about 6 cents out of every dollar of tax collected goes to Pickens County's general fund. There's many other special districts and other entities that receive dollars, such as school districts, CMC, fire districts, and things like that. So your property taxes are only about 6 cents for every dollar to the general fund. And sales taxes that are collected by the county, which is right now at 3.5%, but that's divided between the other municipalities. And so Pickens County only really receives about a penny for every dollar collected in sales tax. So it's a very, very small percentage of the overall taxes go to Pickens County, the general fund. So I just want to make that note. The other thing I'd like to say is, although we as the BOCC have been working on looking at this budget for the last 2 months, as Connie has said, I just want to thank and acknowledge all the staff, because staff have been working on this probably for 9 or 10 months, a very long time. And I really do appreciate all the work that you put into this, and the presentations, at least for me, have been very clear and concise. So I want to thank you all for making me help understand the budgets much, much easier than I would have. So thank you all.
I move to approve a resolution summarizing revenues and expenditures for each fund and adopting a budget for Pickens County, Colorado for the calendar year 2015.
Second.
And this is, again, public hearing on Monday, December 15th. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then we've got the second one, which is part of this too, the appropriating sums of money to various funds of Pickens County, Colorado. Do we have a motion for that?
I'll move that number 2 also.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the next one, levying general property taxes for the 2014 year to help defray the cost of government for Pickens County.
I'll move that also.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And again, kind of beating a dead horse here, this is public hearing on December 15th, which is a Monday, an unusual day for us to meet, but if people do want to speak on the budget, they can do so at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a ordinance establishing fees for environmental health, and we have a packet in us. I know there's an anticipated change to this resolution. And Kurt is here to present.
Good afternoon, Kurt Dahl, Pickens County Environmental Health Manager. We have an ordinance for fees in front of you that is looking at clarifying the fee that's being charged for our use permit, and then adding 2 new fees for 2 new permits. The majority of my fees are actually set in state statute, so we're not able to change those. However, we've come across a couple of things with our use permit fee. We have properties that have multiple septic systems on that property, and when they go to apply for a use permit, we will get inspections for each of those individual systems, and we will issue permits for each of those systems. However, we're charging a single fee per that piece of property, even where we're issuing, in some cases, 4 and 5 permits for 4 and 5 septic systems. We wish to clarify that we should be charging a single fee for each permit and not just one fee for each piece of property. The second item is establishing a fee for the renewable permit that was adopted as part of the 2014 regulation changes to the septic OWTS regulations. This renewable permit is for higher level treatment systems and for commercial type systems. And in looking at that fee, we felt like the amount of work will be very similar to what our use permit program is currently, and so we have recommended setting that fee at $100 per permit. And then the third fee that we have is for a minor repair, for lack of a better way to say it, a minor repair permit. Right now, we do not issue permits for minor repairs, which would include things like replacing pipe and replacing pumps and septic systems. Through our use permit program, we found that it's actually very important for us to capture that information so that when we're issuing a use permit, we actually recognize that those changes were made. And in some cases, we're scratching our head trying to understand what changes were made because it's not consistent with the information we have in our file. So we recommend, or we would like to go ahead and adopt a use permit. However, yesterday at our work session discussion, we recognized that there was an importance in capturing that information, but there seemed to be an offset in we want to know your information, but then we also want to charge you a fee for that. So it was recommended that we go ahead with that permit, and that permit actually be issued even at a later date. A lot of times these repairs are done at a time when my office is not open, over a holiday, over a weekend, and we don't want to get in the way of getting that repair done. It's important to do that. So it's something that would be done after the fact of getting that repair done. As long as we get that information, it was important, but not charging a fee for that service. Just the importance of collecting the information without that fee.
And so that would be a change in the packet that's in front of you today for the minor repair permit that is currently at $50 to $0. But we'd still establish a permit process.
Questions? We had some discussion on this yesterday for those that didn't clue into it about the fact of how important this information is, and if people had to pay a fee for doing a minor repair on their own after the fact, we wouldn't get the information, and it's more important to get the information than to cover our cost. We do recognize that there is a cost to processing these permits, labor time, overhead to that, and all those things, but we felt that it would be best to offset it with other fees elsewhere or other monies from elsewhere, because we didn't think that it would happen if there was a fee. Do we have a motion?
I would move to approve.
As amended?
As amended, thank you.
Second?
First and second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Next is number 6, and we don't need a continuance for that. We're just going to pull it and bring it back at another date. And number 7 is resolution setting airport fees. Brian's here. Tom? And Tom.
Hi,
Hey,
Tom
Tom.
Logan, County Treasurer. Brian Griefey, Assistant Aviation Director for Administration. So this seems to be your day to set fees for next year. The resolution before you sets fees for the airport for next year. There are some increases, but they are nominal. Landing fees are proposed to go up by 4%. That's landing fees both for general aviation and for the commercial airlines. And then terminal rents are proposed to be increased by 2%.
I was just curious when reading this, how much does a CRJ 700 weigh when it's flying in here?
How much does it weigh? 76,000 pounds, that's the
Okay.
max.
So it's
gross
this
weight.
number times 76.
Yep, so
Yeah, this is a
it's-
per 1,000 pound number.
Exactly.
Just, it was a curiosity thing more than anything else.
So for example, that would be $345 to land. That translates with the increase, roughly a $13 per aircraft increase, or 19 cents per passenger if it's fully loaded.
Thank you. Good to have those numbers.
Yeah, that'll figure that.
Brian, you were going to continue?
Yeah, it would just explain kind of our methodology in setting rates and charges at the airport, and specifically these two areas. As part of grant assurances, I know you've all heard about this enough in the past couple of years, but we are required to be as self-sustaining as possible. And this is done at this airport through compensatory rates and charges. And specifically what that means is our airfield should pay for itself, and our terminal should pay for itself as well. And Tom did the calculations on that with some information that the airport provided. The landing fees do fall short of paying for itself, but a 4% increase after last year's 4% was really about all we could justify. And then 2% on the terminal, because we are very close to covering those costs. And this just accounts for the increases in operating costs that we've seen, or that we expect to see over the next year.
Are these fees completely discretionary to Pickens County, or is this something that the FAA looks over and says, you're getting too high, you're getting too low, or whatever?
It's discretionary to the airport and the county. And really, if the airlines, general aviation will serve the market is what dictates that, if they're too high or hopefully not too low.
Except that you can't set a fee that would more than recover your costs
Thank you.
for the terminal or for the airfield, for parking or general aviation, the fixed base operator, that's not restricted, so you can set those fees at the market.
Questions?
So, Tom, what you're saying is we can't make a profit at the airport.
Only on the airfield and on the terminal, with respect to the airlines on the terminal. But we charge the same rent to everyone on the terminal. However, like the rental car companies, in addition to paying rent for their booths, pay essentially a commission on their sales to us, which, you know, is much more than our cost of giving them a booth. And we also rent them space for, you know, storage of their vehicles. But it's just with respect to the airlines in the terminal that we can only recover our costs, and with respect to the airfield that we can recover our costs there, both from general aviation and commercial airlines using it.
But does that mean that we can raise our expenses to raise our revenues?
Yeah, but.
I mean, put in new carpet and say we're going to charge more, or put in more pavement or more line striping and say we're going to charge more?
Yeah, you can only do it after you've made the improvement.
Yeah. Okay.
So just going back to my earlier comments regarding the general fund and where our revenues come from, sales tax and property tax, the airport is an enterprise fund, and in that case, there are no sales nor property taxes that go towards the operation of the airport. It's all user-based.
That's correct.
Mhm.
And I'm just, again, we've gone through so much budget stuff, so questions constantly pop in my head, so I'm going to ask them while I still can. Is there an offsetting cost to the overhead of the county's administration that deals with airport activities? Does the airport pay to the BOCC fund? Does the airport pay to administration fund?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Airport does pay for services rendered, so it's
Yeah.
finance, it's legal,
Yeah.
fleet. So the
So it is-
services that they provide, airport fund money goes into
Yeah.
the general fund to cover those.
Just wanted to make sure that that statement was true, that it is fully self-sufficient. That even though our county manager and our county attorney work on airport stuff, those departments are paid from the airport fund to offset that. Therefore, there are no county tax dollars subsidizing the airport.
And to take that one step further, approximately $1 million goes into the general fund from the airport for those services.
Yeah, for the services that are rendered. Great. Any other questions? See, it's even in the last days, you still learn more things.
I would make a motion to approve.
Yes, please.
Second?
We have a first and a second, and I will just say one last time that these last items that we've gone through are set for public hearing on December 15th, which is a Monday. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next, we're moving to our consent action items. First reading set for public hearing on December 17th. So again, kind of an oddity here. December 17th is our regular Wednesday meeting, and these will have second hearing on a regular meeting. First item is a supplemental budget request. Or supplemental budget appropriations, which are requests that we've already seen, and Susan's here
Yes.
to go ahead.
Well, these are this is the summary of all the supplemental appropriations that you've approved from July through December. I did note the 4 items that you had not seen, or I did not have a signed approval for them, and that is the increase in sales tax and the expenditures associated with them, Health and Human Services grant, the CMAQ grant that is for purchasing electric vehicles by Public Works to put in the fleet. Brian wanted me to point out that any purchase would come to you before it was made. This is just to approve the budget for it. And then the Water Smart grant, which I believe you discussed when discussing the landfill budget.
So those 4 items are placeholders for 2015? Is that the way we're looking at this, or?
What these are changes to the 2014 budget, and what will happen is they will be carried forward into the
Yeah.
2015 budget.
Okay, so that's the key word, the carry forward thing, because we had talked a little bit about CMAQ money and how it should be spent, and it's CMAQ money that's allocated for 2014, so we have to put it into our budget. And the other ones are similar to this type of
Right.
scenario, but there are things that have to go into our budget for this year, even though the projects may not happen till future years, and even though those projects have not, correct me if I'm wrong, been fully vetted. We didn't really make a final decision on how CMAQ money was going to be spent, did we?
You guys gave direction on the electric vehicles. I think the question was, what was the final bid on those vehicles going to be, and was there going to be any funding left over that could maybe be applied to another clean air project?
George?
John, on the CMAQ funds, can they be carried over indefinitely? Is there a time frame where they have to be used?
Well, I think once we're under contract, what's really delayed this expenditure of CMAQ funds this year is the back and forth with Colorado Department of Transportation on getting the contractual documents put in place. Once we have a contractual document in place, I do believe there's a limit within that contract, George, but I'm not recalling what that is. But really the reason that we're at this point towards the end of the year now is we had some back and forth on the contract, some difficulty finalizing the contract with CDOT for the CMAQ funds, and that's really what's pushed this date out right now.
Yeah, I remember when I first got on the board, we had pushed it a year or two before we made a final decision on something.
Yeah, and I know it depends on the contract with CDOT and the nature of the project.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so again, there are 4 new projects that have to be appropriated into the 2014 budget. The rest of the items, which I took a glance over last night, are really items that we have already approved through supplemental budgets throughout the year, so it's just formalizing a resolution to get them into our accounting system. Michael, yes.
You know, I'd like to vote against the appropriations for the CMAQ, but I don't want to vote against the entire appropriations moving forward, so I wonder if we could have a separate vote for the CMAQ.
So the question on that, John, is, and again, I kind of heard your answer, but I kind of felt like there was some vague direction of how to use the CMAQ money, and we'd have more information brought back to us, as you kind of alluded to. So I'm not so sure that there might be another, what I'm alluding to is there might be another opportunity for Michael to voice that opinion when that stuff happens, but.
Well, yeah, at this point, it's really vetting the contract. We've been pursuing a contract with CDOT for use of these funds. They're not totally fungible in that regard. And so, you know, we were acting under what we thought was direction from the board to pursue a contract for electric vehicles for use of CMAQ funds. The question that the board had was the type, I believe, of vehicles that we said we would bring back in terms of the purchase. And so we're in an RFP process, and we're going to bring back those short, medium, and long-term, or long-range, vehicles, you know, to let the board know how the funds were being used to make sure that was consistent with, you know, where the board wanted to be. But there was not a question, I thought, in board direction as far as use of the funds for the electric vehicles. It was just which vehicles were we really going to be purchasing. We did an RFP process that we've been evaluating for that.
Yeah, I mean, as I recall, at least it was the majority of the board.
Yeah.
So it may not have been 100% of the board. But
Yeah, maybe I'm just recalling the discussion.
But as part of that, I forget now, as part of that RFP of the purchase of those electric vehicles, was part of those dollars going to be used for purchase of charging stations?
We also had some charging stations, I believe, at definitely the Public Works. So we had the charging station question at the airport at one point, which we've put on the table because of the expense of those. Part of this is installing charging facilities at the fleet shop, yes.
And does the Rio Grande parking garage
The
currently
parking
have?
garage I know has at least 2 on the first floor level that are made available for any electric vehicles to park and charge at. They're reserved for electric vehicles, and I believe it's free. I don't think there's a charge for that.
Okay. So I guess back to Michael's question, I guess we could break this out.
I think you could break it
With a
out
motion.
into two separate motions. So you'd make a motion to approve the appropriations and the resolution except for the CMAC,
Okay.
and then make a separate resolution for the CMAC.
And if the CMAC doesn't pass, how does
Well,
that?
then we will forego those dollars. We simply won't get those CMAC dollars. That's going to be the consequence. But if that's the board's wish, you are under no obligation to take them. We may want to bring it back to a full board, though.
Right.
Is this a year-end item?
Yes.
Could it be put on the 15th and the 17th
The
agendas?
best way to, not that close together, I mean, the other way we could do it is pass them on first reading for second reading on the, I think these are coming back to
17th.
17th. And, you know, we could break them out at that point.
So at that point,
And
we'd have a
this
full
is really a
board.
vote to bring them to public hearing
Yeah.
at this point. I could do the first reading on the 15th. Okay, John's saying we could do the first reading on the 15th.
I'd make a motion to continue this to the 15th meeting.
The whole thing, or
The
do you
whole
want
thing.
to just?
Yeah, I'll second that. But I'd like to give an explanation of why we're hesitating, at least why I'm hesitating.
Sure, right now, an open discussion?
Well, whenever.
Yeah. We have a first and a second. Any discussion?
So, John Ely, what you're saying is, it's not necessary for us to, on first reading, pass the resolution absent of just the CMAC funds? That would not make any difference?
In order to affect it, you need to have two readings, one of which is a public hearing. They cannot be held in the same day pursuant to the home rule charter. So given that you're already going to be having a special meeting on the 15th to adopt and establish a budget and appropriation and a bill levy, you can simply put this matter on that same day. The board will already be constituted. I'm assuming there's 5 people, and that seems to be the goal of the board, to have all 5 commissioners present to vote on the first reading of the resolution. And that would give you the full dais to do it. The public hearing is already set for the 17th. Whatever passes on first reading can be set over onto the 17th for a public hearing and a second reading. I mean, you can do it right now, too, if you want. It's your symbol in your notice to do so, but it can be done later if you want to do it that way.
Okay. So it's not going to impact the current time frame for the budget?
The important thing is that we do have the second reading within this fiscal year. It's not a best practice to appropriate funds for a previous fiscal year in the next fiscal year. So as long as we can do it within this fiscal year, with John's explanation, I'm fine. I thought we'd need longer notice run there, so that would be fine, and we'll have a full board at that point.
Okay.
And the explanation I want to give to the public is that the cost of these electric vehicles was, from my point of view, was exorbitant. It's not that I'm not against clean air, but they were at least twice the amount of a high-efficiency vehicle, gas vehicle. And I just didn't think, if we were spending our money wisely, if this wasn't a grant, we would be doing something like that. So, and the charging stations were also, and we discussed that with the airport, are very expensive. So at some point, I think we can probably move ahead with electric vehicles, but not now, and not with spending this grant money. I just don't think, if it was our own money, certainly if it was my money, I wouldn't buy an electric vehicle. It's too expensive.
Yeah, and thinking back to the conversation that we had on this, I was in the same position that the expenditures were very high. I also had the position, I don't remember how I stated it, but you know, the CMAQ money is for air quality, and it's a statewide fund, and a lot of areas get this money for various things, and I had questioned the fact whether this was the best use of the money for the entire state. If you could have a better air quality program somewhere else, well, I'd rather that happen somewhere where the air is going to blow over Pickens County and protect our air here too. So, first and a second, any further discussion?
Yeah, I have to comment on this because CMAQ monies, we started to receive, I don't know, back in the 70s or 80s when Aspen was under a PM10 warning, or what's the word I want, even stricter than
Alert.
that? Alert. And so Aspen had to come up with ways to alleviate the PM10. And at that time, I think about that time when the Canary Initiative probably was started. And the city of Aspen developed certain goals and objectives to be able to cut down the PM10, which they did. Those of us who have lived here in the 70s and 80s, we all recall, similar to Denver, the brown cloud that would be over our valley due to many days, especially in the wintertime when there was an inversion. And so these CMAQ dollars went specifically to help address the PM10 issue that Aspen had. And we've been very successful in terms of addressing that, but it's not to say that we should just figure that we've solved the problem and we can move on, because if we don't continue to be diligent through our transportation efforts, whether it be the parking that the City of Aspen has instituted, or the support for RAPTA and the BRT to encourage more people to get on public transit to lessen the number of vehicles coming into town, we could see the PMT rise again. So for us to be able to utilize the CMAQ money is just as important for our community as any other community in Aspen, in the state. And I would think it would be a shame if, just because of a cost of an electric vehicle, that we would relinquish our ability to utilize these funds this year, next year.
Further discussion? Michael?
Well, and in many ways, I agree with George, but I'd rather buy, you know, how many bicycles can you get for $165,000 and hand them out to people? That makes more sense than buying a vehicle that costs twice what a high-efficiency gas vehicle costs. So I think there are better ways to spend this money and keep the air clean. That's all I'm saying. So, you know, I just think that we have to, even though it's a grant, and, you know, we could buy 500 bicycles.
But it seems to me the board had this debate, and we probably should have it with a
Yeah,
full board.
and it's not a debate, I just wanted to make
direction,
my
yeah.
position clear,
Yeah.
because I didn't want to give the impression that I was against clean air. So,
Yeah, and I agree 100%, and I want to make my position clear. I think doing everything full force here in Pickens County is important, but it means using dollars as effectively as possible. And that also means, in the larger sense of things, if someone else could use those dollars more effectively, that does good for us as well, whether it be a neighboring community, you know, or whatever. So that's just part of my opinion on this. Any other discussion? So this is a continuance to the 15th of December for first reading. Second reading will take place on the 17th of December. All those in favor say aye.
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 Question, so I'm splitting out and making two resolutions then. Okay.
Next, we have a IGA approving financial support of Colorado West Regional Mental Health.
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. I think that's to me. And so what is before the board is an agreement for funding of detox services, and it's really formalizing a funding structure that we put in place almost a year ago now. And the board may recall that back in 2013, Pickens County was actually in a partnership for a detox center down in Garfield County, and that detox center closed. And the same month that that detox center closed its doors, the Right Door also announced that its doors were closing for ongoing treatment services. And so the county facilitated a set of meetings with stakeholders locally, and so that was the hospital as well as the municipalities, Aspen, Snowmass, and Basalt, to try and put together a funding model to ramp up a detox here locally. We did do that in really mid-2013, moving into 2014. The intergovernmental agreement in front of you now really spells out the obligations and how each party is to determine funding in the future. And so, briefly, the county under this IGA is agreeing to be the fiscal agent for the agreement with Colorado West Mental Health for detox services. They're doing business as Mind Springs. That contract agreement has been executed through the Healthy Community Fund grant process. We also are providing space at the Schultz Health and Human Services building at no cost. The hospital has agreed, in addition to financial participation, to provide in-kind services, for example, laundry services, and they've also been helping with security, having their security come through. The bulk of the agreement really concerns how the detox center funding is to be split among the participating entities. We didn't have, in 2013, we didn't have a process for determining this. It was a little bit ad hoc. And so the entities came together and first determined what were the contributing factors that we could measure that we agreed would be a good basis for establishing a formula for funding detox. And the three factors that you'll see in this IGA, one is population, the second is the number of liquor licenses, and then the third is the number of admits to the detox that originated from the jurisdictions. All of these are equally weighted. Under this formula, the county's portion is 21% of the total. Just make sure that's right. Basically, the hospital, because they do not issue liquor licenses, and they don't have a population through the Department of Local Affairs, they're taking an off-the-top contribution in addition to their in-kind of 30%. The remaining 70% is split by the municipalities according to the formula of population, liquor licenses, and admits. Rob, last time we talked about this, you had asked, so what does this look like from 2013 to 2014 into the upcoming year? And for the county, in 2013, we had actually budgeted $115,000 for detox services. Under this agreement, that goes down to $50,000. Make sure I'm looking at the, got a couple spreadsheets in front of me.
$56,000.
$56,000, thank you, Rob.
But you had said 20%. I think this sheet says 33% is our contribution based on that formula.
Yeah, I'm
Population,
sorry, I was
liquor
looking at
license, and
I was
admin.
looking at an old one there. Let me scroll through to that. So what you're looking at there is the 33%, but because the 30% comes off top from the hospital, the percent total is 23.7%. And so all entities at this point, with the exception of the City of Aspen, has signed on to this IGA. City of Aspen is scheduling it for their council. I don't have a date yet, but we wanted to get our signature on it. So with that, I'd take questions.
Questions? Comments? The only comment I saw in it was, I don't believe Bill is mayor of Snowmass Village anymore, so Marky's name has got to be on that signature line.
They actually adopted it well.
Oh, they adopted
yeah,
it,
they
right?
adopted it ahead,
Right.
and yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Any discussion? Set for public hearing on December 17th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, a IGA provision for public health public and environmental health services.
Hi, Liz Stark, Public Health Director.
Kurt Dahl, Picken County Environmental Health Manager.
Before you today is a resolution that to approve an intergovernmental agreement between Picken County and the City of Aspen for the provision of public environmental health services. Little history on this. In 2009, Colorado passed the Public Health Act, which required every county to designate a public health, a board of health, a public health agency, and a public health director. It also allowed incorporated municipalities to do the same. And so the City of Aspen elected at that time to establish themselves as a public health agency, the City Council acting as the Board of Health, and the city's Environmental Health Department acted as the agency, and they appointed a public health director at that time. Now the City Council does desire to discontinue their current public health structure, and together the county and city staff have agreed to, would like to merge the boards of health and the public health agency and have one board of health, one public health agency, and one public health director. This is in an effort just to simplify and strengthen the delivery of public health services in Picken County. The IGA specifically outlines the roles and responsibilities of the city and the county, primarily that the county would continue to contract with community health services to deliver public health services, and that the City of Aspen Environmental Health Department and Picken County Environmental Health Department would be able to maintain their separate entities and operate independently of each other. Kurt, do you have anything to add?
George.
So I forgot to ask this last night at our joint meeting with the city, where everyone gave a nod of heads to move forward, but we don't need an IGA with the town of Snowmass Village because we're currently acting as a Board of Health for Snowmass Village.
So there's two things. I actually have been talking to their town manager because we're kind of posing the same question to each other back and forth, and the two things that make it different. Right now, there's a funding issue for environmental health that's addressed in the IGA in terms of state funding that is not a concern for Snowmass Village at this point. The other is the council is actually agreeing to take an action to eliminate their existing Board of Health, and so really we'd be inviting appointment through Snowmass, and we don't see the need for, there's no consideration really on the other side, so we didn't see the need for an IGA.
So, but
Snowmass.
town of Snowmass Village, they currently have their own Board of Health?
No, they don't, and that's the difference, yeah.
They don't.
So they don't have any state funding flowing through like City of Aspen did, which is addressed in the IGA. And they're not eliminating anything, they're being asked to be an appointing body.
And so, unlike City of Aspen, the county has been, the BOCC acting as Board of Health have been providing those services to the town of Snowmass, not the City of Aspen, because they've had their own Board of Health.
Correct.
Okay, I understand, thanks.
Yeah.
Further questions? Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve intergovernmental agreement for provision of public environmental health services.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have another IGA for the healthcare policy and financing for the County Medical Initiative.
Medicaid.
Oh, sorry, County Medicaid Initiative. Reading quick.
Incentive program.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. I'm Mitzi Lettingham. I'm the Deputy for Health and Human Services and standing in for Nan today, who's not back yet. Essentially, however, what you have before you is an IGA, intergovernmental agreement with HCFA, Healthcare Policy and Financing, to allow Picken County to take advantage of essentially a new incentive program that they're putting in place, working in conjunction with the Colorado Department of Human Services. They have decided to create financial incentives for counties to be able to meet certain standards related to Medicaid eligibility and cooperation with other related entities. They want to encourage counties to meet 4 distinct performance measures. And these are outlined in your statement of work, which is Exhibit A. Essentially, it revolves around the court settlement timeliness. They're calling this a timeliness incentive standard. It means that you may earn a payment for each reporting period in which at least 95% of all determinations and redeterminations were timely. So that's within a 45-day period. And again, the state is, the Department of Human Services has been under court order for timeliness for the last several years now. And the state and all counties have been progressing towards this 95% standard, but I think that's an additional incentive to help counties meet this goal. Second is the collaboration incentive standard. This is where if you have attended or hosted meetings with any related entities such as behavioral health organizations, public health, medical assistance sites, regional care collaborative organization, or Connect for Health, you can also earn incentive payments. Third would be the Medicaid determination for individuals leaving a correctional facility incentive standard. This is fairly new, and Picken County has already been working towards this, has met with the jail, and essentially this allows counties to earn an incentive payment in which there is a process for individuals leaving the jail to receive a determination to essentially apply for Medicaid in a very timely way and have that all in place by the time they leave. So, and I know that our teams have met already, as I said, and there is a process to move that forward to the jail. The fourth one is the backlog incentive standard. And this would allow counties to earn incentive payments in which the backlog is less than 5 and redeterminations less than 10. And of course, there's a whole formula for small, medium, and large counties. So we're very much wanting to join in on this opportunity. We don't see any barriers to meeting these standards. As a matter of fact, standard number 2 is we've fully met for a long time now. The director has been meeting with these entities regularly, and so with Eagle County as our partner, working on behalf of us to meet all the application and redetermination deadlines, timeliness standards for Medicaid, we already have that in place. They have been successfully managing backlog throughout the past year. So we're offering that we would like to see if you can approve that we can move forward with this incentive program. Oh, and I should mention, a very big benefit is if you meet the standards and the incentives, the dollars that you're allowed to capture, it can't be greater than $7,198.99 for 2014-15, but based on a maximum for county performance and statewide performance of $3,500, but that money is absolutely discretionary to the county for use. There are no requirements as to how you could, utilize your payments. So that's just another benefit. Some additional dollars that we could capture for developing a program of our choosing, or adding to something we're already doing. So it's a win-win in that sense.
What you're saying, Mitzi, is those dollars would just go into the general fund?
They go into the general fund and they're segregated for under human
Health and Human
Oh, okay, that's
Services.
what I
Yeah,
was
so they
wondering.
would
So
be
it's not for
departmental.
anything, it's
Correct.
earmarked for Health
Department.
and Human Service program.
Correct. They have their own fund balance.
Okay.
Right, right.
Additional questions?
I'll move to approve the intergovernmental agreement with healthcare policy and financing for the county Medicaid incentive program.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Next, we have a consent public hearing, which has been requested by the applicant to be continued to December 17th. Do we have a motion to continue?
We probably need to open up the public hearing on that.
Yeah. I'll open up public hearing on this item. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. This is the application for Cooper Mason Ventures Silver Peak Apothecary retail marijuana cultivation facility license. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for a motion to continue to December 17th.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now we're moving to our public hearing second reading consent items. Resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with the Northwest COG non-emergent medical transportation program. And thank you.
So we met 2 weeks ago for first reading on this item, and the board did pose a few questions as to how the program would be managed, how it would roll out, several questions along those lines, and I have attached to the AIS some answers that I was able to obtain from Northwest COG. So hopefully this would satisfy some of the issues I think that did come up at first reading. Would the board like to go through those, or what would be your thoughts?
Are there any questions from the board? This is a program, like I said,
Right.
that Northwest COG has been actively involved with in other regions of the COG region. It just hasn't been as active as they'd like it to be here, and this is an opportunity for it to have a little bit more involvement. This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on this item, bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion.
I move to approve a memorandum of understanding with the Northwest Colorado Council of Governments for the non-emergent medical transportation brokerage program.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Next, in our consent public hearings, we've got a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the town of Snowmass for recycling services. Kathy?
Hi, Kathy Hall, the solid waste manager. So it's our second reading to discuss the intergovernmental agreement to reflect our current recycling drop-off and transfer services at the landfill with the town of Snowmass Village. We've been providing drop-off and material transfer recyclables for town of Snowmass Village for well over 15 years, and we've never had an official agreement. So this will serve to set an official agreement to continue those services.
Any questions? This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
I would make a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with the town of Snowmass Village for recycling services.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Kathy. Next is a resolution authorizing the filing and collecting of passenger facility charges. Brian from the airport is here.
Good afternoon, Brian Griffey, Assistant Aviation Director of Administration at the airport. This is a resolution approving the filing of a new passenger facility charge application with the Federal Aviation Administration. Essentially, what this is, PFC number 9 is extending projects to be reimbursed, approved projects with the FAA to be reimbursed with passenger facility charge revenues. What a passenger facility charge is that $4.50 fee that is on each airline ticket sold. That can be used for very specific projects, and what this application does is outline what those specific projects are. What that is for Aspen is the local share of the environmental assessment for the airfield reconfiguration, the local share of the environmental assessment for the east side, that's the terminal area, snow removal equipment, including a blower, a plow, and a broom, and the application and administrative fees for the passenger facility charge.
And a broom is not a broom, it's something else, isn't it?
Correct. It's something we call a broom, but it's a very large two-engine piece of equipment. It has a bristled head on it that's about 16 feet long, and that's really our primary piece of snow removal equipment. When there's light snows, dry snows, it does a nice job of getting right down to the pavement to keep it dry and clear for landing aircraft.
Okay.
Any questions? This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for motion.
I'll move to approve the resolution authorizing the filing of a new passenger facility charge application to be filed with the Federal Aviation Administration.
Second?
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We're going to move into land use public hearings and land use action items. I would suggest we take a
Take break.
break.
Okay, so we have a cake for
Cake break.
birthday.
Really?
Yeah.
So we're going to take a 15-minute break. It's 2:10. We'll come back. Welcome everybody back. This is the regular meeting, Wednesday, December 3rd, 2014, Pickens County Commissioners, and we're moving into our land use public hearings. And we've got the Bonnie Lickover, is that? Lickover. Trust activity envelope. Lance?
Yes, Lance Clark, Pickens County Community Development. This is the title and the resolution are kind of a long run for a short slide. There's not really a lot happening, but there is a process required through the Pickens County Land Use Code. This is a restoration or expansion of a non-conforming structure or use with significant changes, site plan and caretaker dwelling unit. The change is really not that significant, as I will show you. The property we're talking about is 190 Letty Lane, and I've put it here on the Elmo for you, and that's the same thing that's here in front of you. This is one of the properties that's on the bench on the riverside of River Road. Letty Lane is a small road that comes off of River Road and accesses half a dozen or so homes above the river in Woody Creek. Essentially, since we just did not that long ago the site visit at Aspen Valley Ranch, this is just across River Road from Aspen Valley Ranch. This being Letty Lane here, Aspen Valley, River Road is just off the picture there to the north. And the Roaring Fork River in blue at that end of the property. The property is demarcated in black. And then on up here is Highway 82. So this is one of the properties, if you're going down valley on Highway 82 and look over to your right, those properties in Woody Creek that are on the bench above the river. It's 190 Letty Lane. And what is happening here is this is coming to you because the existing development is non-conforming by size. It's a 6+ acre parcel in a 20-acre zone. All of the lots are about the same size along there, this being 6 acres. Also, the existing house, which is the existing development on the property, is about 8,000 feet. All pre-existing legal development, but as you know, we now have a 5750 limitation without use of TDRs. But what the applicant is asking, and I'll give you the history on this, is there's an existing accessory structure here on the bench above the river that was originally permitted as a barn. It then got a permit to become an office. But then at some point after that, it illegally became an accessory dwelling unit without any permits. And this was discovered, and red tag was issued. And the previous owner moved forward to get that CDU approved. And in fact, they did go through with staff a caretaker dwelling unit approval request and were granted approval to convert that to a legal CDU, deed restricted. However, they never followed through with it. They never got the permits, nothing ever happened. It was still sitting there in illegal state. And then in 2013, the new owners, the Bonnie Lickover Trust, purchased the property and is now trying to make everything correct, get everything up to speed, and to eliminate all the violations. But as they have looked into the potential of rehabilitating that structure into a CDU, they've come to the conclusion that I would agree with, that it doesn't warrant rebuilding. It was originally built as a horse stall and then modified. It's simply not very structurally sound. It really wouldn't be the best place to throw one's money in rehabilitating that. And so what they've asked is that they be allowed to build exactly the same size structure right here in front of the house and make that a conforming caretaker dwelling unit. This building is about 881 square feet. A CDU can be up to 1,000. They're not asking for any change at all. A new CDU would be built right here at 881 square feet. This building would be demolished, which actually is better for the site from our perspective. It's right now sitting right out on the edge of the bench. This line across here is the bench line, and then it goes down very steeply to the river. So they will remove that structure, proposing to build a new CDU here, and then the only other change is this orange line is the existing driveway, and they're proposing to build a little bit of a loop off of that driveway so that the CDU would have its own access, and the main house would still have its primary access back here. So the total floor area on the site, which is about 8,000 feet, would remain exactly the same. There are no constraints in the area that they propose to develop the new CDU. There are no scenic issues from River Road or the highway, and staff is recommending that the Board of County Commissioners adopt a motion to approve the resolution that's attached, and the resolution would approve the site plan, change to a non-conforming structure, and approve the CDU.
Questions of staff?
Lance, so the staff is looking at it as if there's no additional square footage.
Correct.
Even though the permit wasn't completed, so if the permit wasn't completed, then there wasn't a structure there, so how do you get
The permit was completed for, when this was originally a horse barn and when it was converted to an office.
So
it was. There was a permit for the office. When they converted it to the CDU, they didn't.
But it wasn't a CDU, it wasn't
Correct.
a dwelling.
That's correct.
So now there's a conversion from an office to a dwelling unit.
Correct. An accessory
And
dwelling.
an accessory dwelling unit, and it exceeds 5750. So how did you get there? I mean,
Well, the nonconformity issue is strictly floor area. It counts, floor area counts the same whether it's an office or a CDU.
oh, okay.
There's no difference. It's all residential floor area.
Residential floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additional questions for staff at this point? Dave, would you like to make a presentation?
Lance has done an excellent job providing all the information. If you have any other additional questions, I'd be happy to elaborate.
Let me just follow up on Michael's question. So if for some reason the applicant was coming before us, a new application for a CDU, they would then be under the current FAR Land Use Code of 5750?
Correct. It's in fact, the previous owner, just to when this violation, the red tag was issued, because they converted an office to a CDU without approval for an accessory unit, actually came in to rectify that and got approval, which can be a staff approval, for a CDU in this location. Because again, office floor area, CDU floor area is not an increase in floor area. But they never followed through with the permits to actually make it a legal CDU. The electrical permits, the plumbing permits, et cetera, et cetera. The new owner, buying the property, wanting to rectify and get everything up to speed, came to the conclusion that, yes, they would like a CDU. They're not interested in increasing the floor area, but they don't want to build the CDU there because that particular structure and location doesn't make sense to them. They prefer to build it here.
So the original approval, were they under a vesting period?
For the CDU, when the
original, let's see, where you say, the barn was legally converted to an office with a permit, and then the owner made an application for a CDU. The application was approved, but the owner never completed the permitting process. There was no vetting period, vesting period.
You don't.
You don't.
For a minor
Yeah, okay.
staff-approved things. We don't best.
Lance, I'm going to have you repeat yourself here, but I'm going to
Okay.
ask George's question in a different way. It kind of alludes to Michael's question of how we get to an office to a CDU with whatever allowable square footage there is on this piece of property. Hypothetically, if this barn that turned into a studio, that turned into a, whatever it was, a non-conforming CDU, didn't exist, and they came to us before an application for a new CDU, what sort of process would this go through and scrutiny would this go through?
Yes.
If neither of these two buildings existed,
Right.
and they just wanted to build this.
Right, which was Michael's question. Since they exceed 750 in order to add additional residential floor area, which they could go up to 15,000 theoretically, they would require a TDR.
They would require a TDR at that point for having that. So here we've got a conforming office space that's being used as a CDU, or slightly converted for the use of a CDU, but never officially converted to a CDU. The office space has gone through the permits for that additional square feet, because that's also residential square feet. And now they want to basically use that office space as a CDU and move it to a new location.
That's correct. That's correct. And floor area is floor area is floor area in terms of...
Yeah, the floor area has already gone through some sort of approval. Right. So had that approval been for a CDU back then, they would have been able to do it. And now it's just being moved from one place to another.
That's correct. It's to a certain extent, it's if, this being the main house here,
yeah.
If, let's say instead of 8,000, it was 10,000, which was legal when it was built. You could build up to 15,000 when it was built. Let's say that they had a room here that was an office, and now they wanted to convert that room to a CDU.
Yeah.
It's just the same floor area as far as the code is concerned.
Sure. Additional questions?
So, Lance, is there going to be a separate system then for this?
Dave has had an engineer look at that. He could speak to that.
Yes, our proposal would to increase or create a new septic system to the north of the proposed building site. It's there in a rectangle just off the driveway, right there, yes. Trying to connect to the existing has too many challenges going through disturbing landscaping. We'd have a chamber size and a field issue, so we're just going to build a new system on a meadow.
Okay, and then the water supply is from the current
Water supply is from the current wells, which is approved for 2 dwelling units. We have a storage tank on the site that we can tap off of and utilize.
Okay. So let me ask another question. Does this have a fire sprinkler system?
The house does, and
does?
the new structure will as well.
And the new structure will, okay.
All right, this is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item may do so at this time. Colin? Just checking. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
I would make a motion to approve, where are we, approve the Bonnie Lookover 2012 Trust Activity Envelope Site Plan Restoration or Expansion of a Non-Conforming Use or Structure with Significant Changes in Caretaker Dwelling Unit.
I'll second that. Let me just ask a question. Is the intention of the owner to actually build this? Or are we going to go through another iteration?
As of yesterday, the intention is to build.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like your packet back, Dave, by any chance?
I will do my best to recycle if you don't want them.
For the first time ever. Yeah, it's right next to the
Great. Next, we've got land use actions, Castle Creek Campus minor amendment.
So we have sort of a package of various amendments for you to consider related to the Castle Creek campus. I guess just procedurally, do you want me to run through all of them on my side and then turn it over to Jenny, or do you want to kind of do each one as it comes and hear from both of us? Or?
I think it's all right to go through them all. They're not all that complicated.
No. I mean, there's just one where we have some additional information.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise, we can walk through them. So, anyway, the requests in front of you relate to phasing for the construction on the campus, parking spaces, the variable stream setback, a minor change to the activity envelope, and a confirmation of the historic designation of one of the buildings on the site. So, we'll just continue through those. So first is construction phasing. Let's see, I've got little aids as we go along. This is the construction phasing plan. And phase 1 has been completed, so actually I guess I need to look at it. So phase 1 is what's in phase 1 and 1B are what are in yellow and orange. All of those buildings have been completed. Phase 2, which is proposed to start in August of 2015, are the buildings in pink. And so basically this is a change. Originally there were 3 phases proposed. 1A and 1B were a combination of some of that. Phase 2 is a combination, again, of what might have been 2 and 3. And basically, this, I think, finishes out, for now, the improvements to all the facilities on the campus. So this includes infrastructure improvements, remodeling the Hardy Administration Building, relocating the business building, constructing an administration cafeteria building, which is adjacent to the Hardy Administration Building, a new classroom building, a new rehearsal hall and gymnasium, and new maintenance facilities, and a playing field for a country day school. All of that is to happen between August of 2015 and August of 2016. So we've provided for you, originally the board had approved the construction management and emergency response plans for the school. So we've come back to you as the phases have changed and as those construction management plans have changed to keep you abreast and kind of keep the approvals up to date with you. So basically, if you look at this, I think what you find is that the campus, the music school staff will move off-site from August through, I guess, the next June. Through June. So they will be off-site from August through June of 2015-16. Country Day School will operate during that time. What you can see here is that they will be able to use their lower school facilities, the existing facilities here in this area. They'll be able to basically use this one access, and construction then will occur here and over. So they will use the two lower, in my mind it's lower, but really it's up the creek, those 2 access points. So the construction will share only the main entryway, but then basically everything will be separate, so there won't be any intermixing other than, I guess, on the main driveway with construction traffic and school traffic. And so anyway, then once Country Day is done, I guess the music school will then use those facilities the summer of 2016, and then anticipating that the construction would all be done at the end of that time.
George?
While you're on this, so during phase 1 is when Country Day put up some tents or utilize over by
Move to the Meadows.
The Meadows.
Campus, yes.
And so where would the music school be going?
We're thinking about going to the same place.
Same place, okay. So
That's not decided yet. We're looking at some office space with the Institute at Fetcher, perhaps. We're thinking about, there's a bunch of offices sort of in the backstage of the tent that we usually only use in the summer. We may put some people in Harris Hall. So
because for the music students, they need practice rooms, rehearsal rooms.
This would just be for the winter.
Oh,
we'll be back in operation by the 1st of June. It's possible that perhaps the cafeteria building, which is just cafeteria and administration, may not be CO'd before the summer. That we're kind of working on that phasing right now. But as far as what will be operational by the summer of 2016, everything for the music school will be operational. We'll be back.
Oh, I see. So when you say you move out in August, that's when the festival shuts down. Okay.
So just be our administration for the winter.
Administrative people,
Okay.
Yep.
yeah. Much like you guys moved to downtown Aspen for
That's
that
right.
period of time.
Yep, we were in
Gotcha.
Aspen for a couple of months during the previous
All right,
construction.
thank you.
So I think that's it on my end on the construction management plan, if you have any other questions on that item. If not, I'll keep moving. Next is parking. And the master plan had originally required or specified 155 parking spaces on site. The applicant's requesting to reduce that to 135. The original number was based on what they anticipated their demand to be. And they have since actually changed their policies. They no longer allow music students to drive to campus. How long?
2 years.
Changed 2 years now.
Yeah,
So
2
that's
summers.
been operational for 2 years. So they found they don't need 155 spaces. It's a question for us to reflect in the master plan, because as things have shifted a little bit over time, parking's been lost in one place, whatever. So, rather than forcing them to find 20 more parking spaces, they've approached it by saying, we don't even need those parking spaces anymore. We're not allowing people to drive to the campus. So we've actually reduced our demand, and they would like to reflect that in the master plan. So obviously that's something we support and feel that that's been a great improvement in terms of the transportation demand that we've looked at with them to just minimize the amount of traffic coming to the campus. So anyway, that's that amendment, if you have any questions.
Suzanne, how's that memorialized then? Does that go into their master plan? And
This resolution is an amendment to the master plan.
Uh-huh.
So we don't go back and necessarily amend the big master plan document, but we end up with a series of resolutions that amend, so that reflects this change.
so, but what prevents the music school from amending their policies and saying, well, drive to school, we've still got enough spaces? Well, how do we track that? If that's an assurance, how do we track that?
I mean, we could include that, I guess, in the finding that supports the change to the amount of parking, that this is a result of, a change to the policy that prohibits.
Well, one thing I would say too, there is we do have an audit provision for our transportation management plan that's part of the original master plan. We submitted our first audit this spring, I guess it was. And so in that, we have to prove that we're accommodating all the transportation needs of our students, and we were able to show the increased bus service that we had, increased ridership, and that we had enough parking for the people who were coming to campus. So I guess I would say that I think that would still work to give you what you want. If all of a sudden we decided that we wanted to allow people to drive to campus, if we have enough parking, I would ask if that could still be okay. If we don't have enough parking, it'll all come out of the transportation management plan, plus it wouldn't be a smart thing to do.
Yeah, but the thing that remains permanent is that we've allowed you to have 20 less spaces. So, for me, the exchange is that you make something permanent that facilitated that change.
I guess I just reflecting back to our original discussions in the master plan about parking. It wasn't, it was driven by our perceived demand, and in fact, I think there were people on the board that wanted us to have fewer parking spots, to have fewer cars on campus.
Right, I mean, I agree with the trend. I just policies change. And
sure.
So, given that we now have less parking spaces, I would like to have something memorialized about that policy. We won't revise that policy unless we consult with the county. And maybe it's through the transportation audit, I don't know what it is, just I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel.
I mean, I guess I would just ask about, I like the audit because it's already set up. I don't see the major policy changing. Do I see there could be small policy changes? For example, I'm saying we don't allow students to drive to campus. We allow bass players to drive to campus, right? Because they can't get their instruments on the bus. What if we decide we allow parents of minor children, minor students to drive to campus? I mean, so I think that there is a little bit of gray area there.
Well, it's not actually
So-
not driving to campus, it's parking at campus.
Agreed, because you can obviously drive and drop off.
Drop off someone.
Yeah,
So-
that's true.
So, and so, that's all I'm saying. We're making a permanent change to the master plan. It has to be reflected that that change indeed will go forward in terms of your policies or whatever, that's all.
And I think, I think Jenny's right. I mean, I don't have the transportation plan in front of me, but, I mean, I think that probably is, because you would have represented in that
Yep.
people were no longer, this population was no longer driving and parking on campus. I guess in terms of how to reflect that, if or how to reflect that here.
Well, the best minds of the community development can get together.
Yep. I can go back and look at that, and if it's just adding something that, any changes to parking should be, reflected when we're updated on the transportation management plan or something.
I mean, it could be as simple as, in consideration that they have instituted this policy, we are eliminating or allowing the elimination of community spaces, just so there's a chain of how this occurred.
Okay. Okay. Good for parking. So then the variable stream setback. When the master plan was approved, we established a variable stream setback through the campus. That doesn't show very well, but do my best. Essentially, at the time when we did the variable stream setback, we determined that under a public institutional master plan that you had the ability to vary a setback. And in establishing this variable stream setback, we used a 20-foot setback as a minimum. In most cases, all of the buildings that were cited in the master plan exceed that, but it varies through the campus. And so here, what you can't see very well on the graphic is, some of the distances. There isn't necessarily a specific line, but you can see here, this is a 65-foot distance from the high water line to this building. Over here, there's 38 feet, and that was an existing facility. So we basically, this was the map in the master plan that memorialized that variable stream setback. And then you can see it here, these green areas were riparian areas to be protected or restored. So some of those were existing and some of those were to be added, and that doesn't show up for you pretty much at all. So there you have it. There's my graphic for you.
I can see some green on there.
But anyway, so that was where we were with the master plan. The applicant's asking for a couple of minor amendments to that plan. This might be easier just to hold up for you rather than trying to put down there. So over here, and Jay can help me since I'm upside down. That helps. Okay, let me get my bearings. So this is the existing administration building. This is the addition that they're putting on it, so that's the cafeteria facility, administration building. They've actually found here that they're pulling the building back. There's a sewer line that runs through there. They needed to back off from that. It actually takes them farther away from the creek, so changes the setback in that area. On the other side of the pond, is this a classroom building?
Yep.
Building 7 classrooms. Yep. This is shifted a bit, and there's an area here where it's moving closer to the creek. But still, when I looked at and tried to measure it out, I mean, we're still 40 to 50 feet from the high water line of the creek. So we're gaining some, we're losing some, not perfectly even amounts, but I think, as my finding was, still consistent with what we had anticipated. Obviously, we knew that there would be refinements as they really started designing and locating these buildings. So I see that these are minor changes to the variable stream setback. and we're supporting those requests for the changes. Any questions on that?
Suzanne, is the pond considered a riparian area?
We went through Army Corps actually on a lot of that. Was this one of the ponds, or that was the?
No, the pond that we filled in is what we went through Army Corps for to
Okay.
fill it in, which is filled in, but it used to be here.
Okay,
So we had to get
the swimming pond.
the swimming pond we had to get a permit for.
Okay.
Are the edges of it considered riparian? I have to admit that I can't remember. Matt, do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, and actually the existing ponds were mapped as wetlands.
Okay.
With areas, depending on I'm Matt Webster with SGM, by the way, some areas around that were flagged as riparian. So the wetlands have been, any of the work we've done in or around the ponds has been permitted through the Corps. And then the riparian areas, there is a total accounting for riparian mitigation for any of the areas we disturbed. So that's all part of the reconciliation in this phase 2 is all of the riparian mitigation that's required across the campus.
Okay, so these buildings are impinging just on riparian areas, not on our wetland area. Is that right?
These changes?
Yeah.
These would just be based on riparian, not on wetland, correct?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so our next one is maintenance of buildings. And actually, I'll use this just to orient you. So again, the administration facility, the maintenance buildings are down at this end of the campus, kind of the far end tucked in there. So this is the one where I'd said we needed some additional information to bring back to you. So this was not in your packet, and is some new information on those buildings. Let's see, grab my notes here. What I've got on this drawing is, let me get my line straight. The approved activity envelope is the pink line here. Their proposed activity envelope runs here, and basically the change in the activity envelope is what's shown in yellow. This blue line is a new wetland delineation that comes through here. The blue line on this side is the high water line of Castle Creek. So when they started to design these buildings, the footprint shifted some. And in doing that, they did look, and there was a wet area through here. They had Gary Beach study that and delineate the wetlands. And so again, that's what's shown on this blue line. So as you can see, the change, actually some of the existing envelope was encroached into that wetland area. And the proposed change in the activity envelope, it has some encroachment into that wetland area. In looking at that, I mean, again, this ties back to our variable stream setback. And there was basically a recognition at that time that we were maintaining as much of a setback as we could, as we just discussed when you asked about the ponds and things, Michael. There were areas, riparian areas, that were impacted on the campus with the new development, and they, were required to mitigate for those. So essentially, this is a change that falls within that same realm of what we'd anticipated previously, where there were certain areas that were impacted and where mitigation would occur. In this case, again, with that variable setback and numbers that you can't see very well, with the changes in these footprints, this building is shifted from here to here. The corner of that originally proposed building was 49 feet from the high water line. This proposed building at its closest is 44 feet, so there's a slight shift towards the creek there. But this building has shifted from 20 feet from the setback back to 32 feet at its closest point. So again, at the time, I mean, we were dealing with a lot of constraints on the site, and how to kind of best juggle those and determine what was most important. I think, the creek, the setback off of the creek was considered most important, and again, we recognized that there were some impacts that would occur elsewhere due to that. So I think in this case, there's an improvement overall in the setback. They've worked to get farther from the creek where they can. There is this small wetland area that's impacted. I think, what are those numbers? Maybe Matt can, or Jenny.
300 square feet is what Gary Beach is estimating, but perhaps with construction impacts, he was going to ask the Corps for 500 square feet.
Okay. So again, there is a small wetland here that is impacted. It does require Corps approval for them to disturb this area. In terms of how this relates back to the original approval, basically the request here is for a change to the activity envelope and a shift in the location of those buildings. And I think, again, I feel it's consistent with what we anticipated in the original master plan, looking at trying to maintain as much of a setback off of the creek as we can. It's unusual here where there's a small wetland basically at the toe of the slope, kind of on that other side of the buildings. And from Gary Beach's report, I mean, it relates to, it's related to the creek. It's not an isolated wetland where we have a separate setback. So basically by tying it to the creek, again, I feel like it's addressed under that variable stream setback. And they will have to provide mitigation. So we're willing to support that change, basically under some of the similar findings to what we made before, related to the variable stream setback and allowing mitigation for impacts of those to riparian and wetland areas. And it is a fairly minor impact in this case.
Suzanne, let me ask you, but the building is being built on the wetlands. Is that a minor?
I think in terms of how and why the buildings have been situated, Jenny and her team can probably respond to that.
Yeah, but I mean, you're saying it's a minor impact, but it's, the building is going on. That's
the building is being
impact.
Placed into a wetland area.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's the mitigation that's required then?
Basically, we look at what is being the square footage that's being removed and require that to be replaced.
So on a one-for-one basis?
I think that would be our standard requirement.
Does the Corps have a different standard?
Actually, if there's Lisa Vogel with the Wells Partnership, I'm the owner's representative for the music festival. Gary has started the process with the Corps of the application, but because the actual impact is permanently under 500 square feet being impacted, they may not even require a permit, but we will submit on it and they will decide. It's up to them because it's such a minor amount, and we didn't use up all of the space that we had gotten approved in our first permit, which is now closed out.
Okay, but we're going to require, nonetheless, we're going to require a one-to-one mitigation.
And that was with the when we did the riparian and restoration plan before. I think there was a pretty balanced replacement on site with that. So. Then
this mitigation occurs at this site, or it occurs at some other wetland site on the property?
We would have to see. I mean, I know some of your mitigation before you did
did it all off-site.
Okay, that was off-site credits. Yeah. So we would have to look at what the options are there. On campus, they were able to do riparian replacement.
Right.
But the actual wetland mitigation went through the mitigation bank.
That's correct.
And the mitigation, tell me what the mitigation bank is.
I'm not sure I understand it fully, but it's basically where you can buy credits. And I think is it through WinStar?
It was through WinStar, which I think they don't do that anymore, so we need to look for other options.
They're on hold right now, and there are other options. I don't believe they're in the valley, but they will look for the closest options nearby for Gary Beach.
Yeah, I mean, my preference would be on site or certainly within our area. But
you lost me a little bit. I'm sorry, but so on the credits. So what I'm hearing is that you have to mitigate one-for-one for the wetlands. Is that correct? Is that what I heard? And that one-to-one, you can either mitigate on-site, which is what Michael is suggesting, or you can mitigate an off-site. And in the past, you've been able to mitigate off-site using the Windstar property, which is sold, so it's probably no longer available. I would like to at least see it mitigated within the county. And I'm sure if we do enough work, there's probably opportunities. On-site, obviously on-site is always the best. So I'm not sure where we go from there.
Yeah, I don't think we have the answer to that today in terms of, I mean, I think my understanding is that there probably is not a place on site that they can do it. So then what is their next option? What is the next option? We don't know that today.
And how does that work, the credit though, when you mitigate? So let's say in the past where you mitigated in Windstar, how did that, what was that process? What happened and what did you actually do?
So it's set up as a preservation. In general terms, I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding from Gary is that it's set up as a preservation where someone wants to preserve that land and then they can sell off basically credits as pieces of that land to mitigate from elsewhere, and the land is preserved somewhere else. So, I don't know if that makes sense, but like we bought, let's say, 1/4 of an acre before, and so there's 1/4 of an acre at Windstar that the money that the money from this project went toward. And so that will never be built on. It's preserved as a wetland in a different location.
Okay.
Like a trust. Like a
right, okay.
Conservation easement of some sort.
Yeah.
But it's between parties that, I mean, it's not through the county, so I'm not sure how that's recorded and how it's respected.
So someone has to actually hold that as a conservation easement?
So as a piece of, it's held as a conservation bank, if you will. And when we had to do that with a previous core application, we just provided them with a receipt showing that we had actually purchased those credits. And so we would be able to do the same thing with the county, and we purchased that ahead of time and make sure that before we got building permits, we had that squared away.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like given all the properties along all of our drainages in the county, we should be able to find some place, at least in the county, to be able to mitigate and have a benefit for the county.
I think people have to be set up to do it. I don't think we can just go to a private homeowner and say, can we put a conservation easement on your land?
Yeah.
So that's where my knowledge ends.
Yeah.
So that's that condition, or a condition related to that, is not in the resolution, since some of this is information we've just received. So we'd need to address that in the resolution when we get to that. Last issue is the historic designation of the business building, and there's really nothing new here. It was designated to the historic register. The issue that came up was under the building code, if you move a building, the code says that you're no longer considered historic. We've had conversations with Brian Paul about that and said, well, we designated it historic. We knew it was going to be moved. We anticipated that in the master plan. We still designated it to the register. So clearly, and the intent was not to, once you've picked it up, to then have to bring it up to current code, that we understood that it was this building here and it was going to be this building here. So essentially, this is just acknowledging that, which gives Brian some authority when it comes to, under his code, to point to that and say, okay, we're considering this still historic for purposes of moving forward under the building code. And he can review it as a historic building, even though it's been relocated, rather than as a new building.
So his concern is that the building code, it won't conform to current building code.
Correct.
And that it will be allowed to, let's say the stairs rise and run or something is outdated, but that's the way the building is.
Right.
And that he'll allow that to remain.
Yes, exactly.
But he won't exempt the electrical system or the heating system or the plumbing system, will he?
Just to be clear, we're not remodeling that building at all. All we're doing is relocating it, and then we'll plug it back in as is.
Right, but that's easier said than done. But,
Any new plumbing or new electrical will be,
yeah, I mean, I can't believe that you wouldn't re-electrify the structure, but.
And yeah, I could not speak to the specifics
Yeah.
of what happens when you pick it up and move
Yep.
it, and, right, presumably there has to be a certain amount of rewiring, and I would think that would be to code, but
Right.
right, he doesn't have to make the stairs comply
Right.
and the, different
Yeah, there's
sizes
some
of-
sort of dimensional things that
Right.
won't comply, but I
Right.
would imagine that something like electricity and plumbing.
Mhm. I mean,
You're going to look at that building, you can say, well, these pipes are I'm surprised they lasted this long. So you can say, well, let's replace the supply pipes. I mean, I don't know, but I understand the problem. I just,
Right. This gives him the ability not to have to tell them to bring the entire building up to code. But I don't know that,
Right.
that what is appropriate to be brought up to code.
Right.
I think
Because I was in the basement there, and I know that's going to change.
You were thinking it.
You remember it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's our list. And so then, just as I mentioned with the resolution that's in front of you, actually, a couple of changes related to the discussion on the change to the activity envelope and this area. Condition number 4 in the resolution right now says, with the building permit applications, applicants shall provide. And this actually would apply not to just 2 and 7, but 6A and 6B. And so I'm proposing to change it that prior to submission, basically what we want is an updated variable stream setback map for the master plan and a revised riparian mitigation restoration plan that shows, what has shifted because of these changes. So basically, we'd like that to be memorialized before those permits come in. And then this is a change to the actual recorded activity envelope. So they will need to record a new sheet to reflect this activity envelope. And then in terms of the condition related to wetland mitigation, we would want to add.
And the parking, some arrangement.
Right, some reference to the transportation demand plan or something.
Let me ask Jenny, were there comments from the neighbors about construction and the trucks in the last phase?
None.
There were none. Nobody said, oh my God, what are you
Nope.
doing?
We have, at the end of our driveway, we have the Furmans. They are not around very much in the winter, which is when the construction was. Their kids came a couple of times to visit, and we had no problems. Never heard from the Halls, who are sort of on our backside, and then who would be above us across Castle Creek. The Pappers are also not there in the winter, so it's pretty quiet.
But people do go up and down the
Yep,
road, and they're
that's right.
impacted. They're behind a truck or whatever.
We
But
never
there were
heard
no
anything.
no comments. Okay.
Jenny, I mentioned this yesterday. We had a joint meeting with our Open Space and Trails, and I asked that and Open Space and Trails staffs said it's on their map for future projects to revisit and establish a trail.
Yep.
To get to the music school. And so I don't know in the past if you guys were partners in that endeavor, but I would just plant the seed that I hope you will be partners in that endeavor.
Yep, when we first started getting phase 2 going again, I sort of got in touch with some people at the county and talked to Gary Tenenbaum just to see if this was on the radar at all anymore. He said that it was probably going to come up and start planning into next year. We absolutely want to be part of the process, and we have guaranteed a contribution for that for $250,000, and that's in our budgets. So we're planning on it.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
What do your students say who were trying to get up to the campus? Do they say, gosh, I wish I didn't have to walk on the road, or?
They don't. I think the ones that are bothered by walking on the road get on the bus. I think that the rest of us, adults, are more worried about their safety than they are. I think that's kind of the age bracket, unfortunately. But guaranteed if we have a trail, we'd have more people walking or riding their bikes.
Uh-huh. Do you know what what the exchange of people are on a daily basis? Do the 300 people go up there a day and then return? What, do you know what that figure is?
Well, it's changed a lot with the new halls. I mean, if we have, 3 orchestra rehearsals in a day, that's between 250 and 270 people just in the orchestra rehearsals. So I would say it's probably in the 350 range, just kind of
I mean,
guesstimating.
that'd be good to know, because that's a significant amount of people, and then over the course of the summer, that's really significant. And that'd be good to share with Open Space and Trails, and
Yeah.
and
We can
because
put those numbers together.
that pins the demand
That's right.
basis for it.
That's it, that's the list.
That's the list.
Any questions, any additional questions to staff? Jenny, did you have anything to add in terms of a presentation?
Not at all. As always, Suzanne did a great job. I just need to sit here.
Well, I would make a motion to approve the Castle Creek campus minor amendments to a master plan with our additional notes and amendments to be added.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? And this isn't a public hearing, right? No. I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
John, do we have open discussion?
Just one item. Yesterday, when we were talking about the community development fees, we proposed putting those on the agenda for December 9th, which means I need to be reviewing them right now. ComDev can get them in, but I am inclined to spend a little bit of time with them and review them and maybe move those to Tuesday, December 16th. That's okay with the board.
Wherever it fits.
All right, that's it.
Commissioners, any open discussion or anything that needs to be discussed before we adjourn?
Are you gonna finish that cake?
Two pieces left. Sugar is too much. You can have it. I took a couple bites out of it. You're welcome to it. It's too much sugar for me. Can't do it. Kind of tone my diet a little bit. I think it's that industrial sugar that I can't have.
Industrial sugar?
Well, refined sugars. All right, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.